she was truly hated more than anybody by Ringo Starr. Richard Starkey, better known as Ringo Starr, was born on July 7, 1940, in the working-class district of Dingle, Liverpool, England. He rose from very humble beginnings to become one of the most beloved figures in the history of popular music. Early in life, he experienced much hardship. His family had very little income, and his childhood was marked by serious health problems. As a young boy, Ringo spent long stretches in hospitals recovering from illnesses like peritonitis and tuberculosis that kept him away from school and delayed his education. These unfortunate events set in motion the resilient spirit within him and deep appreciation for living. During those long hospital stays, he discovered his love for rhythm, often drumming on tables and bedpans, thus unknowingly laying the foundation for his future as one of the world's most iconic drummers. Prior to achieving international fame, Ringo had done various jobs, including working as an apprentice joiner and a machine operator at a Liverpool factory. However, his passion for music could not be kept hidden. Inspired by skiffle and early rock and roll, Ringo began to play drums with local bands until joining Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, one of Liverpool's leading groups at the time. With his dynamic way of drumming and happy personality, he stood out. And by 1962, destiny came calling. When the Beatles' original drummer Pete Best was dismissed, Ringo was invited to join John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. His arrival completed the lineup that was going to change the course of musical history forever. As the drummer of the Beatles, Ringo Starr was already known for his steady, reliable beat, his inventive fills, and his unique sense of timing. Though he would often stick to the background, his musical contribution was vital to the signature sound of the band. Songs like Ticket to Ride, Rain, and A Day in the Life were examples of how he could enhance a melody with subtle yet powerful rhythm work. Beyond drumming, Ringo's warm personality and comedic charm made him a fan favorite. He also stepped into the spotlight as a singer on several Beatles tracks, including With a Little Help from My Friends, Yellow Submarine, and Octopus's Garden, each of which reflected his approachable, good-natured character and childlike sense of wonder. When the Beatles disbanded in 1970, Ringo Starr refused to fade into the background. Instead, he embarked on a solo career that proved he was far more than just a drummer in a famous band. His solo albums, such as Sentimental Journey, 1970, and Bokus of Blues, 1970, showed his versatility and deep appreciation for different genres in music, including pop, country, and jazz standards. His album Ringo, issued in 1973, became a massive success, with hit singles such as Photograph and Your 16 topping charts all over the world. His friendly, relatable style resonated deeply with audiences, and his collaborations with his former Beatles bandmates demonstrated the enduring bond they shared even after the band's breakup. Beyond his music, Ringo Starr developed a successful career in acting and film. He appeared in several movies, including Caveman, 1981, That'll Be the Day, 1973, and The Magic Christian, 1969, alongside Peter Sears. His natural comedic timing and down-to-earth personality made him an appealing presence both on screen and off. In later years, he also became a narrator and voice actor for children's television, most notably lending his voice to the beloved series Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, introducing a new generation of fans to his warm, engaging storytelling. Since then, Ringo has continued to tour and record, performing with his all-star band, a rotating lineup of celebrated musicians from various generations. His concerts have become joyous celebrations of music, unity, and friendship, from Beatles classics to solo hits and songs by his bandmates. His influence as a drummer also continued to grow, with countless artists citing him as an inspiration for his precision, musicality, and understated brilliance. In 2018, recognizing his contributions to music and culture, Queen Elizabeth II Ned Ringo, officially making him Sir Richard Starkey, an honor far past due for a man who helped shape modern popular music. Ringo Starr's romantic life is a reflection of both the turbulence of his years as a world-famous Beatle and the enduring strength of love found later in life. His two marriages, first to Morin Cox and later to Barbara Bach, represent very different chapters of his personal journey, each marked by distinct emotions, challenges, and personal growth. Ringo's first marriage was to Morin Cox, a Liverpool-born hairdresser who had been a devoted fan of the Beatles before she met him. Their story began in the early 1960s when Beatlemania was exploding across the globe. Morin and Ringo met at the Cavern Club, the famous underground venue where the Beatles honed their craft and built their earliest fan base. When they met, Morin was just a teenager, and despite the overwhelming chaos surrounding the band, their affection for one another grew quickly. Ringo, known for his warmth and humor, was deeply attracted to Morin's grounded nature. Unlike many others drawn to his fame, she saw him as Richard Starkey, the man behind the drums, and not just Ringo Starr, the international sensation. On February 11th, 1965, the two married at the height of the Beatles' fame. In a media frenzy, thousands gathered outside the registry office, while inside, the ceremony was small and emotional, attended by close friends and family, including fellow Beatles John Lennon and George Harrison. Morin was loyal and strong through those years, while Ringo toured the world and faced superstardom's pressures. Morin held together home life in England, often shielding him and their growing family from the overwhelming glare of the spotlight. The couple went on to have 3 children, Zach, Jason, and Lee Starkey. Zach would later follow in his father's footsteps, becoming an accomplished drummer himself and playing with iconic bands like The Who and Oasis. As the years went by and the Beatles broke up in 1970, serious strains on the marriage began to pull it apart. Fama, long separations, and the temptations of the rock and roll lifestyle finally took their toll. Ringo has said himself that during this period he struggled. Immediately after the Beatles' breakup, he went into alcoholism and lived a wild, crazy life. Despite Morin's efforts to keep the family together, their relationship started to grow distant. Their marriage finally ended in 1975, though they remained connected through their children and mutual respect. Morin Cox unfortunately died in 1994 from leukemia at only 48 years of age. Her death was very devastating for Ringo, who was with her through those final days. He has said later that she was one of the most genuine and caring people he has ever known, a true part of his life that he would always carry with him. Many years of soul-searching and personal change later, Ringo would again find love, this time with Barbara Bach, a talented actress and model, best known for her role as Anna Amasova, the Bond girl in the 1977 James Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me. The two met in 1980 on the set of their adventure comedy Caveman, in which they both starred. The chemistry was instantaneous and undeniable. Ringo later called his meeting with her love at first sight, and Barbara brought calmness, elegance, and emotional stability into his life, so in contrast with the tumult of his earlier years. Their romance quickly blossomed, and they were married on April 27, 1981, in a most extravagant ceremony at Marylebone Town Hall in London, the same place where over 10 years earlier Paul McCartney had married Linda Eastman. Friends, family, and fellow musicians gathered to celebrate the union of two people finding peace and companionship with each other. Barbara became a huge influence in helping Ringo battle his demons of addiction. In the late 1980s, both Ringo and Barbara checked themselves into rehab, a life-changing decision that altered their course. Ringo often speaks of Barbara as the one who saved him, not only emotionally, but physically also, claiming that her love and support were crucial in his journey to getting sober and stable. Throughout the decades, their marriage has remained one of the most enduring and admired in the entertainment industry. Despite the pressures of fame, Ringo and Barbara have also managed to create a quiet and meaningful life together, dividing their time between England, Monaco, and Los Angeles. Of course, they share one interest in common: a commitment to humanitarian causes, particularly in the support of environmental protection and addiction recovery programs. Barbara and Ringo also share a deep commitment to peace and love, two philosophies Ringo has so often spoken about through his art and music. Through the years, The Beatles have been regarded as the epitome of musical brotherhood. For young men from Liverpool who changed the world together. Yet, behind the fame and unity that captured millions, tensions often brewed within the band, some of them running deeper than the public ever realized. For Ringo Starr, the quiet Beatle George Harrison was someone he admired and respected, and with whom he played alongside as the group rose to immortality. However, as personal slights and jealousy and betrayal began to creep into their relationship, Ringo later admitted he had harbored more anger toward George than anybody else in his life. "George was like a brother to me," Ringo once said. "But sometimes brothers fight harder than enemies ever do." Those words carried years of unspoken tension. Although Ringo was often seen as the peacekeeper of the Beatles, his calm exterior masked frustrations that gradually built up through their years of stardom. Ringo had joined the last, replacing Pete Best in 1962, and almost immediately found himself caught in a whirlwind of fame. George, who had been with John Lennon and Paul McCartney from the start, often treated Ringo like an outsider, not cruelly, but with the subtle superiority of someone who had been there first. George could be distant, Ringo recalled. He had his world, his own spirituality, and sometimes he made me feel like I wasn't part of it. Matters came to a head in the later Beatles years, as personal egos and creative ambitions started pulling the group apart. George was eager to be recognized for his songwriting, overshadowed as he felt by Lennon and McCartney. Ringo, meanwhile, struggled to find his place in a band where his musical contributions were often minimized. There were days, Ringo confessed, when I didn't even want to go to the studio. George and I would barely look at each other. I was tired of feeling invisible. The filming of Let It Be in 1969 captured the strain vividly. The silent glances, the short tempers, and moments when Ringo simply walked out, unable to handle the tension. But what truly shattered Ringo's affection for George came later when personal lives became entangled. Ringo's then wife, Maureen Starkey, was the subject of a brief romantic involvement with George in the early 1970s. Though George was also married at the time to Pattie Boyd, the revelation hit Ringo like a thunderbolt. "I felt betrayed," he admitted years later. "It wasn't about a woman. It was about trust. It was about someone I thought was family crossing a line you can't uncross." The affair became one of the most painful episodes in Ringo's life, causing deep resentment toward George that took years to fade. "I hated him for what he did," Ringo said bluntly. "I really did. It wasn't anger that went away quickly. It stayed with me for a long, long time." George, for his part, later acknowledged his mistake, though not always in the most apologetic way. When confronted, he reportedly told Ringo, "Well, you know, all things must pass." The remark, a reference to his own album title, infuriated Ringo, who felt it was a cold dismissal of the damage done. Friends close to the Beatles have said that Ringo avoided George for months after the affair came to light, and even when they did see each other again, their conversations were tense and shallow. "It wasn't like we could just pick up a drumstick and a guitar and make it all better," Ringo explained. "That wound didn't heal with music." Over time, however, Ringo's deep spirituality and forgiving nature began to surface. As the years passed, he reflected on the meaning of friendship and the futility of holding on to anger. When George fell ill with cancer in the late 1990s, Ringo visited him at his bedside, setting aside all bitterness. "I told him I loved him," Ringo recalled softly. "After everything that happened, I realized that love was stronger than hate. I didn't want to leave this world with that pain still between us." George reportedly smiled and took his hand, and for a brief moment, the years of tension melted away. When George Harrison passed away in 2001, Ringo was among the first to speak publicly about his friend. Through tears, he said, "George was my brother. I might have hated him once, but I never stopped loving him." That confession captured the complexity of their bond, the fierce